Hi all, welcome in next video of WebAPI. Okay, so in this video we are basically going to discuss about JWT token, authorization and authentication. Okay, so I also wanted to include action filters, but I think this would only take a lots of time, so I am excluding this content for this video. I will definitely add this content on next video, but currently we will be talking about only JWT token and authentication authorization part. So before going ahead, I just wanted to show you, like in the last video we had implemented create CRM users API. Okay, so let me show you. So last time what was happening, this one is, yeah. So last time we had successfully implemented create user CRM user API, but while giving the call to the database, we were getting the response properly, and the user was also created successfully. So there was no issue on that. But what we were expecting, like we were expecting user ID in a response, so that user ID was not properly coming out from the response. So the video was getting means longer, so I had stopped the video and told you that I would confirm you in the next video. So I implemented that particular things also just after that video. So what we need to do, like we just need to like get the value in this way, like cmd dot parameter. Here we can pass the index, like it's coming on sixth index. You can see 3, 6 and 7. Okay, so seventh is user id in a parameter section, like you can say seventh is user id. So I'm just passing a sixth here. Six means indexing gets started from the 0. So first time is 0 and sequentially the user id is on sixth position, so it's coming on the sixth position. And we can also like copy this string and put here in double quote and get the parameter value. Okay, so that would also work fine. So on the .NET framework I was expecting this much is enough for getting the value, but no, this one was not only enough. We need to cast it firstly on the decimal format, then to the integer format to get the actual value of the user id. Okay, so doesn't it matter, like we are getting the value, that's important for us. So after this implementation we are getting the user id value. So it's not a big implementation, or just single line implementation. So you can also make the same change and you would be able to get the actual value. Okay, so I'm not going to run this particular because it will take extra time and I don't want to waste more time here. We just want I just want to like go ahead and discuss about the further things. Okay, so we successfully implemented three APIs. You can see here, like get user details, delete user details and create user details, create CRM users. Okay, so before going to like for the update one, I'm just wanted to implement put some more important topics here. Okay, so we have a one more and major important topic for API. Like this is being asked a multiple time, what is authentication or what is authorization and how can we achieve, okay, for our API and microservices. So I just wanted to like come for that thing only. Okay, so in our API we are going to achieve authorization using the JWT token. Like a JSON web token, you can say it's a full form is JSON web token. So we are going to achieve using this JWT token, and most of the organization is preferring using of the JWT token. They may like come with this different like encrypting concepts like CH2 256 128. They may have some different logics for that, but most of the like organization are accepting JWT token authorization and authentication. That's a more secure, encoded, and provide the like faster response as per compared to the other mechanisms. Okay, so let's move to the next what we are going to learn today. So like what is authorization authentication, I told you we will be discussing on that. JWT fields, what the fields we required for implementing the JWT token based authorization. Okay, so before implementing JWT, definitely we will need to validate the user. If the user is validating with our databases or with our validation concept, so then definitely after validation, then we go further for creating the JWT token. So token, why we are creating the token? Token is something like which we are like sending to someone to access the API. Okay, like if we have some API like get user details, so it's a secured API, like we cannot publish this API to everyone. So we will authorize few peoples or few clients. Using that authorization, they would be able to access the API. Okay, so like authorization is required whenever we wanted to secure our data more precisely. So in the case of required clients, if the client wants to access the data, on that case client firstly has to be authorized. Okay, when they will be authorized, then only they can access the API's data. So that is the very important thing in terms of security. Okay, so we are going to discuss about it. Yes. And reading configuration details from web setting, that we also need to learn this today. Validating CRM token users. Okay, so the main thing we are going to cover here is the JWT token creation, which is very important for the WebAPI development perspective. Okay, so before going ahead, what is authorization and authentication? So I told you authorization means providing a permission to access our APIs. The simply we saying means if we have some APIs and we wanted to expose to the third party, like, and we wanted to make it secure to the other ones, like if we wanted to expose to someone like Samsung, so we don't want this open to the other people can uh, through some we can say you hacking things or something, they cannot get the data and read the data. So that's why we are creating some mechanism to secure our APIs. Okay, so only the intended person can get the data, not the other person. That comes for the security purpose and very important in terms of web API and microservice mechanism. When we are communicating with the multiple systems, like we have a three different system, client, backend and databases, and we are continuously communicating through the APIs, and data is like processing from here to there, here there to here. So that kind of security is very much important. Okay, so that we are going to okay do this. Authentication, like authentication is something like that the user whom they are claim to, like we need to validate the user, like authenticating the user whether this user is authenticated properly or not. So authentication means validating the user, whether the user is the user they are saying, or he is someone else, like he is not the proper user and appropriate user to get the access. So before the authorization, authentication is required. Okay, so before going ahead for the authorization means providing the access for the API, we will authenticate the user. So firstly we will validate the user. If user is validating or authenticated successfully, then only we go for the authorization. Okay, so we firstly need to authenticate using some concepts and logics, like we are saving our data in the databases, so definitely we will going to the database with some details what the user is providing. We will validating the users and then coming up with the like response, like this is the authenticated user, this is not the authenticated user. Okay, so firstly we will be authenticating the user, then after successful authentication, then we are further moving for the authorization. Okay, so for the authentication, user will provide some details like user ID password or email ID password, some kind of details. Okay, using that details we will going to the some databases and verifying the user identity, and once it gets verified, we are like saying going at user to like get the access of the APIs. Okay, so what is JWT token? Like we are going to implement JWT token for the authorization purpose in our web API. So what is JWT token? JWT is JSON Web Token. Okay, the acronym is JWT, JSON Web Token. It is an open standard which allows transmitting data between parties as a JSON object in a secure and compact way. Okay, the data transmitting using JWT between parties is digitally signed so that it can easily be verified and trusted. Okay, so whatever the token we are creating, that token is precisely gets created for that particular user only, no other can access that. Okay, so that is very important, and that's why we are using it, and it's making a very secure our web API. So it's a very important topic, and we need to like clearly understand, then moving. And if you are not getting anything, you can like put any time in the chat or contact me for further information. Okay, so like for this implementation we have to make some changes in our API. So firstly we will need to create one validate user table. Okay, so validate user, what this will look like the same way I shown you in the uh, second screenshot. So there will be some user ID, password, hint question, default password, answer, email. So basically we are going to validate the user using the password and email. Okay, so he will be giving us the email ID. We can also ask for the user ID, but yes, user ID and password, but I'm just requesting here email ID and password. So once we get the email ID, we will be validating the users, and once they validated, the response will be coming from the database as a user ID. Okay, once we are getting the user ID, based on the user ID we will be fetching up these details and creating the token. This concept we are going to implement. So for that we not need to mess up with the user component, user pipeline. We are going to create a new pipeline, new for the new pipeline implementation we will create the new controller, new interface, new classes, new entity. Okay, so definitely one table is required that we are going to implement. One authorization controller we are going to create, and definitely there is a new controller, so we need to implement that the all things like APIs to BL to DL and DL to the database, and whatever the response we are getting that gets like sent back by the APIs. So like there are two interfaces required, definitely one for the BL and one for the DL. Two classes, definitely one for the BL and for the DL, and entity in like token request and token response, which are responsible for communicating for the API. Okay, so this class would be looking the same. This way the class would be looking. So what the fields we required? So basically these fields we are going to configure in the appsetting.json. So the JWT key are like key, who had issued this token, and what are the audience to be targeted, and what is the subject. So this can be vary for different organization and different security mechanism, but this is for our APIs we are going to putting the details in this way. You can also customize as per your like convenience. This is not something like which we need to send in some strictly. Okay, so we have these keys, and based on these keys the token gets created. Okay, so make sure whatever you are key using and for the token creation, the same key you using for the token validation. Okay, if you like have created a key using the different parameters, and if you validating the token using the different parameters, the token won't be validated. Okay, so that thing you need to take care. So after this successful implementation, token will created in this way. You can see this is the long string, okay, which is coming. So that is very in an encoding format, so no one can like introduce this, and no can get the what the exact value is coming inside. So this is the secured format of the token, so that we are going to create on the next. Okay, so I already implemented this mechanism in test API, so that would like give you the faster response for our coding. Otherwise this takes lots of time. I already like invested my 4 to 5 hours to implement this mechanism in test API. so I don't want to implement take your 4 to 5 hours. Okay, that is a longer time, so we are trying to close this in 30 to 35 minutes. Okay, so we already have that code ready for us, so I just wanted to show you firstly how does it work. Okay, so get user token, the new API we implemented. Okay, so try it out. So what we need, we required for this API email. So I'm passing email ss@gmail.com. Okay, and the password I'm passing is ss@93. Okay, so how the response will come, let's see. Definitely there would be a debugger, so it's going for the debugger, no issue. Again, we'll go for the debugger because we have a multiple debuggers. So actually I was debugging, I'm getting some issues, so I was debugging it. So let's see how the token is coming. So this way the token will come. You can see here the message will be appearing like user validated successfully, and the token will come in this format. And this token you can pass to the client. A client can use this token and gets validated properly. Okay, and after validating he can like access the API, but before validating no one would be able to access the API. That is the security for this JWT. Okay, so let's get started for our API. So I told you like we need to introduce a new controller for this. So we have a BL, DL, entity API. So new controller we need to use add. So right click here, add new controller. So we need to add API controller read and write action. Yeah, API controller read and write action. So what the controller name is authorization. Okay, authorization controller.cs add. Okay, so controller is added successfully. Now we need to add BLDL and BLDL things also. So we one interface we need to add I authorization BL. Okay, so that also we're going to add new item interface. It's for BL. Yeah, I authorization BL. Okay, I authorization BL dot CS. This is the interface for BL. Okay, this has been implemented. So one class also is required, so I'm also adding one class. Authorization bl.cs. Authorization bl.cs. Okay, it is coming under the repository. Yes, that's fine. So DL class is implemented. Now come for the DL. One interface for the DL we need to implement. I authorization DL. Okay, this will be the authorization here, and one class is also important. So add one class authorization dl.cs. Okay, authorization dl.cs. Okay, so this is also implemented. We will make the changes, but before just complete the activity we required. So entity we need to add one request and one response. So entities be required. So one class token request.cs token request. Okay, token request. So request is added here. Remove this. Otherwise we need to add this. Make it public. This is every time we are doing. Okay, so I know you are aware about it. Okay, so this is a public class. Token request is created. And one more thing, add new class token response. Token response.cs. Okay, add it also. Remove. You know why this is? I'm removing this. If I'm not removing this and we are using the reference is CRMS.entity, so it will not take this reference for the token response, because it is coming from the CRMS.entity.response. So we will need to add one more response CRMS, one more reference CRMS.entity.response. So instead of putting the different references, I'm just removing it so that it can fall under the same namespace, and be they would not be required to implement multiple. Okay, so just complete it firstly, request and response. Okay, so quickly we are doing. I just have done this in a test API just because I can complete this activity in just precise time. Okay, so basically for the response we are required of two things. One string which will be including the token, and one more string which will be responsible for indicating the message, whether the user is validated successfully or not, whether the user ID and the password is not provided, or something kind of messages. Okay, so that we are passing through the message, and the token will be sending us the token which is actually created by the our API. So this is the response and this request. In the request we are taking email ID and password, so that we also need to put here in the request body. No, token request body. Okay, the two property we required for the request, token request, and two property we required for the token response. Now next we need to implement our BLDL, firstly API then BLDL. So authorization controller is already implemented here, and we have a BL is already created, we have a DL is already created. So let's see, first BL is, we need to make this interface public. Okay, and this class is also public. Okay, so if you're not implementing the class, the reference won't get displayed. So firstly we start implementing the class one by one. So whole and soul our logic will be coming from uh, BL. Okay, all the business logic will be coming from the BL. So firstly what we need to do, this is the new controller, so definitely we need to inject the dependency of BL to this controller and the DL dependency to the BL controller, as we did for the user details. Okay, so let's complete this quickly. So we already have authorization controller. Okay, so you can see here like authorization BL, like BL dependency is injected in our API, so that we can call the BL methods from the API controller. So firstly it will be giving us the error. Okay, so what happened, I already copied with the controller name, so that is not appropriate. We need to only copy the implementation. So we need to inject add the dependency here, CRMS pl.interface, and BL will be coming here, and token, so token response will get added. This method is not yet created, so we need to create this method inside the BL, then we would be able to access this method from here. So let's go to the BL. BL class. Okay, this in BL, so this we will add the interface as well. Okay, so this is the class we created inside the BL. So firstly we injected the dependency of DL here, you can see, as well as we injected the dependency of the configuration, okay, which is coming from yeah, configuration. This extension is required for using the configuration, and configuration, what configuration is doing, using the configuration, you can see here I am reading the value of the app setting data, JWT subject. Okay, so anywhere if you wanted to read the value from the app setting file, so you need to you need to use this extension. Firstly you need to add the like this NuGet package, okay, from the manage NuGet, and you can then use this particular configuration extension method. Okay, and using this extension method you would be able to access the app setting configuration. So let's quickly do this also. It will give us a lots of errors, but we will need to resolve that one by one. Okay, so this method we need to also declare in interfaces, bli dot interface, then we can implement this. Async is not required as this is the interface. Whenever the async we are putting, it means we are going to put the implementation of async in await. Okay, so this references we need to add. Response is added, system.threading for the task. Okay, so it's done. We need to use this reference to the BL class. Okay, so it's failing because all the implementation is not yet done. What else it is saying? Okay, that we need to use the reference. What else it is showing? Implement the interface. Okay, so we need to resolve this all these things, then we would be able to DL implement, then it is we would be able to like come off resolve these errors. We are also using DL method. So as I told you earlier, like we will be getting email ID and password as an input. Okay, so we will be validating those email ID and password inside the validate CRM user table, and after validating that we are returning user ID as a response, and using that user ID we already have created one method, you already knowing about it, get user details by ID. Okay, yeah, this one, get users details by ID. So we will consume that same method and we will be getting the user details. Okay, and based on the user details we are creating the token. So crm.dl is also we need to use, and this configuration we can only resolve by adding the NuGet package. So it will ask for adding the NuGet package. So let's in package manager and install it. Okay, so let's go there. Oh, so okay, so this package we need to install. Okay, so this package is installed. Next we need to further resolve the dependencies. So this is installed. Now we can use the reference. Okay, so that would get resolved. See, so this is your system.threading is required for the task. So let's use the dependency. Task response means entity. So we also need to insert the entity. Validate user. So we did not yet implemented the DL, so that it is filling claim. So that we also need to add the system security claims. Okay, this for that we need to add the model token security. So we can install this by finding in NuGet package manager. So this is also we need to install system dot identity model. Yeah, this one Microsoft one. Okay, so we need to install this. So that is also installed. Okay, so let's go what else is needing. So we need to add the reference for that. So all these will get resolved. Symmetric reference is required. Okay, so our BL, and only this one is pending because this is been implemented in DL, and we did not yet implemented anything in DL. Okay, so that we need to implement. So what is the logic we are using here, that I can explain you, because this is the business logic layer and all the token creation logic is placed here only. Okay, so DL is only being used for validating the user. So what I did here, I am calling this BL class from controller. So what I did here, just explain, this is the main method which is actually responsible for like fetching of the token and creating the token. So we are getting a user email ID and password in a response a request. Okay, so if request is not null, request is containing email ID, request is containing password, both are not null. Okay, then we are going for the further implementation. If they are null, then what we are doing, like you can see, if these are this condition is not getting true, then we are jumping to the else part. And what else is saying, required user details not provided, means whether email is not provided, whether password is not provided, because both, if anyone is not, means anyone is not null, means anyone is null means something is not provided. If email ID is not provided, only password is provided, or if password is not provided, only email ID is provided, then only this condition can be um, like false. In that case what will happen, like it will be stating the message required user details are not provided. Okay, in case like both user ID, email ID and password is given by the, and definitely it will be given by the user, then only he will be asking for the validation. Before giving the password, they would not asking. So what we need to do, if they provided the uh, email ID and password, we will be coming to this line. Okay, in DL line, validate user. What validate user is doing, validate user is taking the email ID and password as an input, going to the CRM detail table which we already created. You can see here some data is containing here. So it will be validating the email ID, this email ID and password. If someone is giving this email ID and this password, then only the user will get validated successfully, and as a response this particular call will be sending the user ID. So user id we are getting as a response. So firstly the request will be coming to the database and validating this both these details and sending the user id as a response. Okay, so like suppose like we given the user like email id and password, and user validated successfully and we got the response here. We got the user id response, user id as a 1. Okay, so what will happen here, we already have a user details dl, okay, in which the method is already written get user details by id, which was the first method we created. Okay, so we already have this method written over there, so we can just call this particular method and we can pass the id, and after passing the id we will be getting the response, user response. And inside the user response what we are getting, you can see here inside the user response we are getting user id, first name, last name, country, mobile, email, package id, but we only required this detail, first name, last name, and mobile is also not required, email id. So 3-4 details we required. So instead of creating a new api, I thought like it would be a good implementation if we are consuming the existing one. So I just used the existing one api for getting the user details. Okay, so we will call this API and we will be getting the response. Once we get the response successfully, we have this implementation for the JWT token. So claim, what claim is does? Claim is something like we are creating some config. We have some configuration, and based on that configuration and that user details, we are going to create the token. So claim you can say is a request, kind of request for generating the JWT token. Okay, so it uses both of the things like user details as well as the application configuration. If there is something missing in both of the places, like if someone is passing the proper user detail but not passing the proper application configuration, on that case the claim will also not get generated properly. But in some cases, like if user is passing the application configuration properly but not passing the user detail properly, on that case also claim is not generating properly. Okay, and if claim is not generating properly, the token will not get validated, the JWT token will not get generated properly. So that is the very essential information for validating and generating the JWT token. Okay, so like we are supposing we are doing the right configuration, we are getting the proper application configuration, and we have the proper user details. So next further we are going for the creating the key. So key we already have mentioned in configuration. Okay, so whatever the key value we mentioned here in configuration, so on the basis of that this UTF security, like this encoding gets generate the key. Okay, and based on the this security algorithm, it's generate for the sign-in key, and based on the e-square or audience and claim details, it's generate the token. Okay, so we can also like change the its expiration time. I put the expiration time for 1 day. We can just make it for 1 hour or 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, whatever the times we wanted to take it available, make it available. Okay. So actually what is happening here for these three, only encoding is happening. Okay, whatever the configuration we put on the appsetting.json, we are reading the appsetting.json here, we are passing the key value, and based on the encoding mechanism the encoding is happening. Okay, so we have a like security algorithm mechanism HMA SHA 256. Okay, so on the basis of this we are encoding this security token. But in different organization, the different token like security mechanism can be used. They may have some their inbuilt security mechanism for creating the encoding key, but this is the most of the organization using the HMACHA 256 because it's already good, providing a good security. So we are not like they don't worry about too much. But in some cases where they require a lot like very precise security, so they can also have some their encoding mechanism. So we can just pass our this particular key sign details, and the key encoded key gets generated, and we can use that key. Okay, so but the flow I'm explaining here would be the same at all places. So this details are going to be useful at all places. So the mechanism will be the same, but yes, their like details could be the different, their security mechanism could be the different, their encoding mechanism could be different, but the purpose going to be the same. So I'm showing you how I put there in appsetting.json, not at put it here, so I need to also put this. So appsetting.json, where is the API? This is the entity, this is the PL, and this is the API. So let's see. So this detail I put here. Key I put, this is my security issuer, CRMS inventory, audience, CRMS user, subject, CRMS service access token. You can also put your own keys here, and based on this key and if your audience the like token configuration gets generated. Okay, so you can put your own keys here, like you can put your name, your organization name, your website address, your some you can say unique token. Okay, sometimes for transactions you get the unique tokens from the clients, so you can put here and that token gets validated, and like further you can use the APIs. So here I am. So these 4 5 things are also required. So okay, so just be next we need to implement the DL, because DL is not yet implemented. So we implemented the BL. So authorization.dl is here. Class is already created. So what I written over there in DL. So inside the DL, I've just written the code for validating the user. So that is not a big implementation. Also, you can see here validate user class I created here. So what validate user is doing? Validate user the same way they are connecting to the database. In this inline query, you can focus. In this query, you can see select user ID from CRMS valid user table, where email ID is this and password is this. Okay, means whatever the email ID password we are getting, we are passing here, so that we can get the user ID. If we are getting the user ID, okay, in the case if we are getting the user ID, we are sequentially going ahead, and we can map this user ID here, and this user ID will get returned to the BL, and based on this user ID we will be using the get user details by ID API and get the user details, and based on the user details and application configuration we are going to generate the JWT token. Okay, so let's implement this also. Okay, so this is our system.thread is required. Integer Oracle connection manage data access you already used, so you are aware about it. and db also system dot data common is required for this. So it's just this implementation interface is required. So we need to declare method here for the interface. Okay, and the further implementation we did in our DL class. Okay, so validate user async, and their implementation is here, validate user async. No, we need to use this one. Validate user async is actually calling to the database. Okay, so this is not the DL method, actual DL method. The actual DL method is validate user, and inside the validate user we are calling validate user async. Yes, we can use this one also, but in case of we may have some DL logic, so we can put here in above this call, so that would be we can say get the space for implementing the DL logic before calling the database, actual database. And validate user async is actually calling the actual database. Okay, so that we need to take care of this. So authorization DL. Okay, async is not required because we are not implementing a wait. Okay, so DL is also implemented. You can see here. So CRMS dot DL interface we need to. Okay, so the same thing I was telling you. Okay, you can see if I implemented authorization.dl here and we did not make the changes of this. Okay, so it's asking for us to for this sequence cms.dl.interfaces. If we are removing the interface from that authorization dot this space section, so what will happen, like crms.dl would be enough for uh, adding the references. Okay, and it would be common for all this, like it is comes like a application level, and if we putting the interface it comes like application then under interfaces section. Okay, so then we next further implement in controller class authorization controller.cs. So you can see here already the red underline have gone, so means it's getting the reference properly here. Let's build if anything. Yeah, the most thing, startup.cs, in which we are like adding the reference of the middlewares and pipelines which are going to communicate with each other on in case of like implementation of dependency injection. Okay, so we also need to add the reference for these two new implementation for the interfaces, I authorization bl and I authorization dl in startup.cs. So let's take it from here and put the same in dl. Okay, so we need to implement the references as well. Okay, so I think we are done, and that's why I created the like one concurrent test API. That's why we cannot spend a lot of time for just writing the code. We just need to clear our understanding. Okay, and once we clear our understanding, we can implement the solution in our API. Okay, so I try to clear you all the things which I implemented in my test API, then I also implemented here in CRMS API. Let's build the solution and see whether our implementation is working properly or not. So firstly build it. It's building successfully, means we can run it. Okay, so we are getting our API name here. You can see our controller is also visually authorization controller, and second is user controller. We will remove this unused APIs further, but firstly we created only this API. So let's try it out. We need to put the email ID. So ss@gmail.com, and password I put there ss@93. You can see it's coming to our API controller function. We need to put the debugger in DL, that is important. Okay, and we also need to put the DL in PLCS. Yeah, this one here. Okay, so that we can understand what the logic is happening. Okay, let's start function. F10. We need to click F10 for the step in. F11 here. So we are coming to the BL. Okay, so here you can see take token request. You can see email is coming and password is coming. So there is this condition is going to be a true because both are not null. Okay, this is useless. I think we will remove this. This is further for the DL validate user. So let's go to the DL. So we came inside the DL. Okay, this is the DL method which is calling to the database. Connection opened successfully. Okay, so the connection is open and this is our query. Select users on this, and I put this format because the code in the string is coming in double quote, and we always put a single quote when we are creating the Oracle query. So let's see how the code is created. Select user ID from CRMS valid user where email ID is this in single quote and password in this single quote. Okay, so this is the perfect query. If you want, we can also run this query in Oracle so that you can see whether the response is coming same or not. Okay, so I'm putting this single quote. Actually, one quote I did not pick up. It may take some time because connection will be setting up. So you can see one user ID is coming. Okay, one user ID means we have some data, but there the user we have a user existing in our database, and the user ID is one. You can see the one is this one S93. This is the Gmail ID. Okay, so let's continue there in our debugging. So here you can see user ID is coming here one. Okay, we did not created the stored procedure, but we can create. Okay, but I did not like I can just use the inline query, but further if we require, definitely we will be going ahead for the stored procedure. So you can see here user ID is present here, so it's not 0, and user ID is greater than 0. Means in some cases, in worst situation, if we are getting minus user ID, that's why I put, because user ID means never can be in on a minus. Okay, so that's why I put the 0, so that we can see that the proper user ID is coming. So if you see, like if user ID is not coming properly, then we have a different validation. User is not validated successfully. Means we have a user present in our database, but it's not validating successfully. So this response message will get displayed. Okay. So let's F10 and see what is further implementation. Okay, so see we are here in okay. So we are here, you can see one mistake is happening, we did not correct it. You can see here the, okay, no, it's fine, result is coming here and result is there. Okay, good, that's fine, that's fine. So function F10, let's get into this. You can see it's also calling to the database. We are providing user ID as a 1, so let's see what the response is coming here. You can see user ID, what the data is coming. We already validated this call, so it is, I think, working properly. Mobile is coming, first name is coming, last name is coming, mobile. Okay, so mobile is 2 times, it's really okay. Email is coming, package ID is coming, so every data is coming for this user, so that's fine. Let's continue. So means after this execution we are getting the details for the user. Okay, so like after passing the user ID, we validated email ID and validated the user. You can say validated or you can say authenticated user by passing the email ID and password. Okay, once user is validated, we got the user ID, and using the user ID we fetched all the user details in user response. Then further we are going to creating for the token. So you can see here, like user first name is created coming here, last name is here, and first name, and user ID is here, email ID is here. Okay, so all the data is coming, and you can also, the username I put here is executed, so you can see the user validated successfully and the response is coming here as a token. So token is creating properly, what I was telling here. Like actually I click on the next step, so it's executed. So what I created here, username, you can see username I put here first name plus ID. Okay, you can also create it in your way, like first name plus last name plus user ID, means whatever the logic you want to implement here. But this could be used for both generating the token and validating the token, so make sure this is like using on the same way. So keys we are getting from here, and then after successful execution, like we are generating token, and we are using JWT security handler dot write token, and we are passing the details whatever we got in a sequence. You can see this token is a request for this, and based on that we are generating the token and assigning to the response dot token, assigning our response in a response. Okay, and we are passing a message user validated successfully. Yeah, user not validated, we can see the user validated, user validated successfully successful, and token gets generated, and token generated. Okay, so this way we are using. So in this, like in this video, we have created the token using some JWT token creation mechanism. So on a next video, we are trying to understand how we can implement for the further validation. Okay, like we have created the token and we sent to the to any client. So how client can use this token as an input for validating and getting into the API. Okay. Okay. So we are getting the response. So mm, okay, so we already have seen this all this. So I'm just removing the debuggers. Yeah, the same place I was showing you. So response have already been generated. Response arrived. We got the response. So the key. So what the key is, I want to show you. The key is generated in this format. You can see in this sequence way. Okay, so it actually makes a complex creation in creation of encoding. So it's an encoding mechanism. So key and sign in, you can say the same way sign is also generated. Sign in key 17 array logics. Okay, so I also don't know how they are using to generate it. So that actually making our system more secure. Okay, because we can directly see the ID and password and we can directly log in. But if we are getting this being we are like encoding our details into this format and sending to someone else, so he would never be able to understand what is happening and what is written over and what is written inside of this encoded token. Okay, so that is good. So let's see how the token key version C. It is very difficult to understand what is written over here. Encoded payload header is this, payload is this. Okay, so this is payload. You can see payload. This is the mechanism they used, and finally the token gets right. Yes. So this is the final token gets created, which we are getting in our uh, response. Okay, and this message is also getting loaded. The user validated successful token got generated. Okay, so continue, and we are getting the response message also token got generated. If let's see if we are not passing any email, so what I did there, like if we remove this. Okay, this is the self, we are passing null email ID. Okay, so execute it. What you will see, user is not validated successfully. Okay, means if we are not passing the proper user detail, it will not give us the token. As simple as that. And we need to take care. Means if we are not passing the proper user detail, it should not get validated. Like if we passing some invalid user details like this, let's see, user is not validated successfully. Means our we are also handling a like validation. Like if a user is validating authenticated, then only we are authorizing a user to access the API. So that was our target. So authorize, like currently we just have created the token, so we will give this token to the client, and how client is going to consume that token, that we are going to discuss in next video. Okay, so please make sure you understood the concept for JWT token, whatever we implemented in this video. So please try to understand and try to implement at your side also, so that it can be handy for you for the next implementation. Okay, so I hope it was the helpful for you. Thank you so much for uh, thank you so much for understanding today and joining today. So let's see on the next video, and next video is going to be very essential for us, because we are going to learn how to validate the JWT token from the client side. Okay, so this token creation plus token validation both together creates a authorization. Okay, so both thing we need to understand. So please make sure to understand this one first, and then we will be understanding the second logic for the token validation. Okay, thank you so much for the watching. See you on the next video.